Ukraine calls on all people to forget peaceful life to defeat Russia. Russian officials accused Ukraine of using British weapons in terrorist attacks. German parliamentarian calls on NATO to shoot down Russian UAVs and planes. Russia and many partners build the North-South corridor. Ukraine calls on all people to forget peaceful life to defeat Russia. In the context of the new military enlistment law about to take effect, the spokesman of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine called on all people to sacrifice and forget peaceful life to defeat Russia. Ukrainian Defense Ministry spokesman Dmitry Lazutkin said on May 11 that the entire Ukrainian society would need to sacrifice and forget its peaceful life to defeat enemies like Russia. Accordingly, Kyiv is reforming the military service system to increase the number of soldiers enlisted, in the context that the country is facing a series of disadvantages in the war with Russia. Ukraine's new military conscription law, signed by President Volodymyr Zelensky in April, will take effect on May 18. Starting from May 18, when the law on military mobilization takes effect, there will be changes. Currently, when many people are fighting on the front lines, some people live their lives quietly, which is this will end, Mr. Lazutkin said on Espresso TV. According to Mr. Lazutkin, life in Ukraine's capital Kyiv is currently very different from the situation in the unusual eastern region of the country. It would be normal if our enemy was weak. But for such an enemy, Russia PV, the whole country and the whole society need to be mobilized, the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry spokesman added. Ukraine's new conscription law reduces the age of mobilization from 27 to 25, and requires all Ukrainian men between the ages of 18 and 60 to register their readiness to serve with the army and carry this registration with them at all times. Beside me. On April 23, Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba announced a temporary suspension of most consular services for male citizens aged 18 to 60 until May 18, meaning these individuals can only apply for documents by how to return to Ukraine. According to RT, Moscow estimates that Ukrainian forces suffered casualties in the Russia-Ukraine war at nearly 500,000 people. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said last week that Ukraine will lose more than 111,000 soldiers in 2024 alone. Russian officials accused Ukraine of using British weapons in terrorist attacks. A senior Russian diplomat said Britain is supporting Ukraine to strengthen London's role in NATO. Russian Foreign Ministry official Sergei Belayev said Ukrainian forces are actively using weapons supplied by Britain to carry out terrorist attacks against Russian regions. London remains one of Kyiv's biggest arms donors, providing £7.1 billion, $8.9 billion, in support since the start of the conflict in February 2022, he said. Belayev, director of the Second European Department of the Russian Foreign Ministry, said in an interview with TASS news agency, broadcast on May 11. Weapons supplied by Britain are being actively used by the Ukrainian army in terrorist attacks against civilian infrastructure and civilians in Donbass, as well as other regions of Russia, he said. According to the diplomat, last month's announcement by British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak of a £500 million, $617 million, military aid package for Ukraine was an attempt by Britain to gain a more prominent role within NATO and among European countries. The British acted in a similar way when they began delivering Storm Shadow cruise missiles and Challenger 2 tanks to Ukraine, becoming one of the first countries to supply Kyiv with such equipment. He said. Mr. Belayev noted that Russian diplomats have repeatedly warned their British counterparts that supporting the government of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is harmful and leads to further escalation, causing casualties, civilians. London's abandonment of its confrontational course, including sanctions, is a necessary condition for restoring bilateral political, trade and economic relations with Moscow, he said. Tensions between Russia and Britain worsened last week after British Foreign Secretary David Cameron said Ukraine had the right to use British-supplied weapons to strike targets deep inside Russia. If the country decides to do so, German parliamentarian calls on NATO to shoot down Russian UAVs and planes. A group of German lawmakers called on the West to help Ukraine shoot down Russian missiles and UAVs. FAZ reported on May 11 that a number of German lawmakers from both the ruling party and the opposition support the idea of NATO helping protect western Ukraine's airspace from attacks from Russia. Interception of Russian missiles and UAVs will be carried out from NATO territory, the parliamentarians emphasized. According to FAZ, some experts such as Nico Lang from the Munich Security Conference or Lieutenant General Heinrich Braus, former Deputy Secretary General of NATO, have suggested that the Western military alliance could shoot down Russian missiles over the air. Ukraine's border area with Poland and Romania. Polish officials have also mentioned this possibility, but no specific decisions have been made. Congressman Anton Hofreiter of Germany's Green Party said that NATO can help Ukraine protect its western airspace from Russian firepower. He emphasized that this topic has not yet been discussed because NATO is still focusing on providing additional air defense systems to Ukraine. Agnieszka Brugger, a parliamentarian from Germany's Green Party, also said that NATO placing air defense systems on the borders of countries so that the western region of Ukraine can also be protected is the right action. Meanwhile, Mr. Roderich Kieswetter from the opposition Christian Democratic Union, CDU, party said that Western countries could shoot down the firepower that Russia launched into Ukraine. This will reduce the burden on Ukraine's air defense forces and allow them to protect areas on the front lines, Mr. Kieswetter said, recalling how the United States and other Western countries protect their airspace. Israel faced Iran's attacks without becoming a party to the conflict. Marcus Faber from the ruling coalition's Free Democratic Party, FDP, also agreed that, in principle, airspace over Ukraine's border areas could be protected by air defense systems on NATO territory. However, Mr. Faber noted that air and missile defense systems are in short supply, so long-term ammunition supplies must be guaranteed. Germany is one of the leading countries in supporting Ukraine's air defense capabilities, having provided Ukraine with many modern defense systems in recent times. Russia and many partners build the North-South corridor. Russia and many partners are making efforts to build a North-South international transport corridor to avoid control from the West. According to the Indian publication Eurasian Times, the North-South International Transport Corridor is becoming more attractive to new participating countries, due to recent geopolitical changes. The newspaper said that this route not only helps Russia and Iran own a corridor inaccessible by Western sanctions, but can also become an attractive alternative for these countries. Tuesday. The reason is explained because the previous trade route through the Red Sea has become more difficult and less safe due to attacks carried out by Houthi forces. The West has become accustomed to using its control over trade and transit routes to punish rival nations. To end this situation, continental routing has been proposed, especially China's One Belt, One Road initiative. According to the Indian newspaper, the acceleration of construction of the North-South corridor became a reality immediately after the West applied sanctions against Russia. Eurasian Times commented that with the implementation of such a large-scale initiative, the importance of the Transcaucasia region will certainly increase, through which goods will flow. For example, Azerbaijan has relied on the modernization of necessary roads and railways. The North-South corridor has the potential to change the lives of millions of people in the region, opening up new opportunities for economic activity, freedom of movement and protection from the impact of sanctions, the newspaper commented. Previously, it was reported that Russia would provide funding to build Iran's Rasht-Astra railway as part of the North-South corridor, showing the serious efforts of Moscow and Tehran,